Let us travel back in time together, drifting gently across the centuries to a world of marble columns and olive groves, where the Mediterranean sun casts long shadows across ancient stones. We find ourselves in Athens, in the 4th century before the Common Era, a time when philosophers walked the dusty streets in simple cloaks, engaged in conversations that would echo through millennia. Here, in this cradle of Western thought, a revolutionary idea was beginning to take shape, a philosophy so radical, so stripped of pretense, that it would challenge everything people believed about the good life. This is where our story begins, with a teacher named Antisthenes, a man who learned from Socrates himself, and who would plant seeds that would grow into something extraordinary. Cynic philosophy, a school of thought that dared to ask what would happen if we simply let go of everything we thought we needed. As we begin this journey together, allow yourself to settle more deeply into comfort, to breathe slowly and naturally, as we explore these ancient ideas that speak to something timeless in the human spirit, the longing for true freedom, the desire to live authentically, unburdened by the weight of possessions and pretense. Tonight, we walk the streets of ancient Athens, we sit in the shade of its philosophical schools, and we listen to conversations that change the world. Let the gentle rhythm of this story carry you, as we discover how a handful of thinkers in togas and sandals discovered truths about simplicity and self-sufficiency that remain relevant even now in our very different world. Close your eyes if you haven't already, and let us begin our exploration of the Cynics, those ancient philosophers who rejected everything for freedom. To understand how Cynic philosophy came to be, we must first understand the world that gave birth to it. 4th century Athens was a city emerging from turmoil, still recovering from the long and devastating Peloponnesian War that had ended just decades before. The golden age of Pericles had passed, and with it, some of the confidence and certainty that had defined Athenian life. Yet Athens remained a remarkable place, a city where citizens gathered in the agora, the marketplace, to debate, to trade, to share news and ideas. Philosophy was not confined to quiet libraries or university halls. It happened in public spaces, in gymnasiums and under shaded colonnades, where teachers would gather students around them and explore the deepest questions of human existence. Into this world came Antisthenes, a figure who stands at the threshold between the classical philosophy of Socrates and something entirely new. Born around 445 BCE, Antisthenes was not a typical Athenian. His mother was reportedly a Thracian, which meant he was not considered a full citizen, a fact that may have shaped his later skepticism about the value of social status and conventional honors. As a young man, Antisthenes studied rhetoric, the art of persuasive speaking, and he became accomplished in this field. But something happened that changed the direction of his life entirely. He encountered Socrates, that gadfly of Athens, that persistent questioner who went about the city asking uncomfortable questions and challenging people's assumptions. Antisthenes was captivated. He would walk every day from Piraeus, the port city several miles from Athens, just to hear Socrates speak, to participate in those probing dialogues that turned certainties into questions and forced people to examine their lives. From Socrates, Antisthenes absorbed certain crucial ideas: that virtue is the highest good, that it can be taught, and that it is sufficient for happiness. But he would take these ideas in directions that even other followers of Socrates might not have anticipated. What exactly did Antisthenes learn from his beloved teacher Socrates? Perhaps most importantly, he learned the method of questioning everything, of not accepting conventional wisdom simply because it was widely held. Socrates had famously declared that the unexamined life was not worth living, and Antisthenes took this to heart. But while Socrates questioned, he still participated in Athenian civic life. He served as a soldier. He engaged with the democratic institutions of the city. Antisthenes began to wonder if even these conventional structures deserved scrutiny. After Socrates was executed in 399 BCE, condemned by the city he had spent his life trying to improve, Antisthenes, like other followers of Socrates, had to grapple with what his teacher's death meant. Perhaps it confirmed his growing suspicions that conventional society was not to be trusted, that the opinions of the masses were unreliable guides to truth or virtue. Antisthenes began teaching at a gymnasium called the Cynics, located just outside the city walls. This was a significant choice. The Cynics was designated for Athenians who were not of pure citizen birth, people like Antisthenes himself. In choosing to teach there rather than in more prestigious locations, Antisthenes was already making a statement about the irrelevance of social status. It was from this gymnasium that his philosophy would eventually derive its name, though the exact etymology of cynic remains debated. It may come from cynosarges or from the Greek word for dog, kynikos, reflecting the philosopher's shameless behavior and simple lifestyle. As Antisthenes developed his ideas, certain themes began to emerge with clarity. He taught that virtue was the only true good, and that once achieved, it could not be lost. External things, wealth, reputation, pleasure, even physical comfort, these were not merely less important than virtue, they were actually irrelevant to happiness, and potentially obstacles to it. This was a startling claim in a culture that valued honor, success, and material prosperity. Antisthenes pushed his ideas further into territory that must have seemed strange, even threatening to his contemporaries. He argued for a radical self-sufficiency, what the Greeks called autarkia, the quality of needing nothing outside oneself. The truly virtuous person, he suggested, required nothing but virtue itself to be happy. No possessions, no particular social relationships, no comforts or pleasures, none of these were necessary. This wasn't mere asceticism for its own sake, it was about freedom. Antisthenes recognized that every possession, every attachment, every desire for external things created a kind of dependency, a vulnerability. The person who needs many things can be controlled through those needs. The person who needs nothing is truly free. Consider what this meant in practical terms. Antisthenes advocated living simply, with minimal possessions. He questioned the value of education in traditional subjects, suggesting that virtue was not learned through studying poetry or mathematics, but through practice, through training oneself to need less and to endure hardship. He challenged social conventions, including the importance that Greeks placed on family lineage and citizenship status. These categories, which determined so much in ancient Athens, were to Antisthenes merely artificial constructs that had no bearing on a person's true worth or capacity for virtue. He went so far as to suggest that the wise person was a citizen of the world, not of any particular city-state, a cosmopolitan idea that was quite radical in an age of fierce civic loyalty. Imagine Antisthenes in his later years, living with extraordinary simplicity, wearing a rough cloak that he would fold double for warmth, carrying a staff and a small bag containing his few possessions. There are stories that Socrates himself once joked about Antisthenes' pride in his poverty, suggesting that he could see Antisthenes' vanity through the holes in his cloak. Whether this story is true or not, it points to an interesting tension. The pursuit of radical simplicity could itself become a form of display, a different kind of status-seeking. As we complete this first part of our journey through Cynic philosophy, let us rest for a moment with the seeds that Antisthenes planted. Here was a man who learned from one of history's greatest teachers, who absorbed lessons about virtue and self-examination, and who then asked, what if we took these ideas seriously? What if we really lived as though virtue was the only thing that mattered? What if we stripped away everything else? All the possessions, the social climbing, the endless pursuit of pleasure and comfort, and focused solely on becoming good? These were not merely theoretical questions for Antisthenes. He lived his philosophy, adopting a lifestyle of deliberate simplicity that set him apart from other philosophers who might discuss virtue while enjoying comfortable lives. And his example did not go unnoticed. Among those who encountered his teaching was a man who would become far more famous than Antisthenes himself, a figure who would take these ideas to their most extreme and colorful conclusions, Diogenes of Sinope, whom we will meet in our next chapter. But for now, as you rest comfortably, breathing slowly and naturally, let yourself reflect gently on these ancient questions. What do we really need? What makes us truly free? What happens when we begin to let go of the endless accumulation of things and status and approval? Antisthenes suggested that beneath all these layers of social convention and material desire, there is something simpler, something more authentic, a virtue that is sufficient unto itself, a freedom that comes from needing nothing. And with these quiet thoughts, we complete the first act of our journey. The seeds have been planted in ancient Athens. The questions have been asked, and soon we will see how they grew into something remarkable. For now, simply rest, breathe, and allow these ideas to settle gently in your mind as we prepare to meet the most famous Cynic of all. And so we arrive at the figure himself, Diogenes of Sinope. His name has echoed through more than 2,000 years, carrying with it stories that seem almost impossible, tales that blur the line between philosophy and performance, between wisdom and wit. Take a slow, gentle breath as we step into the bustling marketplace of ancient Athens, where among the merchants and citizens, the politicians and priests, there lived a man unlike any other. He chose to make his home not in a house with walls and rooms, but in a pithos, a large ceramic storage jar, the kind typically used for grain or wine. Imagine it there in the agora, this enormous terracotta vessel turned on its side, just large enough for a man to crawl inside, to sleep, to shelter from the rain. This was Diogenes' dwelling, his chosen residence, and it was perhaps the most visible statement of his philosophy that one could imagine. While others built homes and filled them with possessions, Diogenes needed only this simple jar. While others accumulated wealth and status, he stripped away everything that was not essential. The marketplace buzzed around him, a constant stream of humanity engaged in the endless pursuits of commerce, reputation, and social climbing. And there, in the very heart of it all, sat Diogenes in his jar, living proof that another way was possible. He was born in Sinope, a Greek city on the Black Sea coast, sometime around 412 or 404 BCE. The details of his early life are shrouded in stories, some contradictory, some almost certainly embellished over time. One tale suggests his father was a banker who defaced the currency, and that Diogenes was exiled as a result. Whether this is true or not, it carries a certain poetic resonance, for Diogenes would spend his life defacing the currency of conventional values, showing that what society considered precious was often worthless, and what it overlooked was truly valuable. When he arrived in Athens, he sought out Antisthenes, whose teachings we explored in our previous rest. But Antisthenes was not eager for students. The stories tell us he even struck Diogenes with his staff to drive him away. Yet Diogenes remained, offering his head for another blow, declaring that he would find no wood hard enough to keep him away so long as Antisthenes had something to say. This persistence, this determination, would characterize everything Diogenes did. He didn't simply adopt Cynic philosophy. He embodied it, lived it, breathed it with an intensity that startled even other philosophers. Let your breathing slow now, gentle and easy, as we settle into the rhythm of this ancient world, where one man decided to ask the most fundamental question imaginable: what do we actually need? To understand Diogenes, we must understand that he was not simply poor, not simply homeless in the way we might imagine. He was making a choice, a radical philosophical statement with every aspect of his life. He owned almost nothing. Perhaps a cloak, a wooden staff, a cup for drinking water, and even the cup he eventually discarded after watching a child drink from cupped hands, realizing he had been carrying an unnecessary possession. Every reduction, every stripping away of the non-essential, was a step toward what he considered true freedom. The ancient sources tell us he walked barefoot, that he begged for food, that he ignored the most basic conventions of Athenian society. But this was not asceticism for its own sake, not self-punishment or deprivation in pursuit of some future reward. Diogenes believed he was living naturally in accordance with nature itself, free from the artificial constructs that made others miserable. When people expressed shock or disgust at his lifestyle, he would often respond with a question or a demonstration that revealed the absurdity of their own assumptions. He was famous for his sharp tongue and his fearless speech, what the Greeks called parrhesia, the freedom to speak truth without filter or flattery. In the bright daylight of the Athenian agora, Diogenes once lit a lamp and walked through the crowds, peering into faces. When people asked what he was doing, he replied simply, "I am looking for an honest man." The implication was clear and cutting. In this city of great thinkers and proud citizens, honesty was so rare it required a lamp to find, even in broad daylight. Let your mind drift gently through this scene, the afternoon sun warming the stone, the philosopher with his lamp moving through shadows and light. Another time, when asked where he came from, Diogenes replied, "I am a citizen of the world," in Greek, cosmopolites, from which we derive our word cosmopolitan. This was revolutionary. In the ancient world, identity was inextricably tied to one's city-state. To be Athenian or Spartan or Corinthian was fundamental to who you were. But Diogenes rejected this. He belonged to no particular city, recognized no artificial boundaries. He was, perhaps, the first person in recorded history to claim this kind of universal citizenship, to place his identity not in political structures but in his humanity itself. Breathe slowly now, feeling that expansion, that opening up of boundaries. The stories about Diogenes often involve animals, and this too was meaningful. He observed dogs, their simplicity, their lack of shame, their ability to live in the present moment. In fact, the word cynic itself comes from the Greek word for dog. Whether Diogenes and his fellow philosophers embraced this term, or whether it was initially an insult, matters less than what it came to represent. A dog-like shamelessness, a refusal to be bound by human conventions, a natural honesty. Diogenes lived, in some ways, like a stray dog in the city, belonging to no one, free to go anywhere, unconcerned with what others thought. Rest now in this image, this ancient philosopher and the stray dogs of Athens, all moving freely through the streets as the sun travels across the sky. Perhaps the most famous story about Diogenes is his encounter with Alexander the Great, and we should pause here, breathing softly, to contemplate what this meeting represents. Alexander was by this time the most powerful man in the known world. A king, a conqueror, a figure of almost mythological status even in his own lifetime. He had heard of the famous philosopher who lived in a jar, and curiosity led him to seek Diogenes out. The story goes that Alexander found him lying in the sun and stood before him with his entourage, casting a shadow over the philosopher. "I am Alexander the Great," he announced. Diogenes looked up at this king, this man who commanded armies and held the fate of nations in his hands, and replied simply, "I am Diogenes the dog." Alexander, reportedly impressed by this man who showed no fear or flattery, asked if there was anything he could do for him, any gift he could give. Diogenes' response has resonated through the centuries. "Yes, stand out of my sunlight." Imagine this moment, this extraordinary collision of power and principle. Alexander could have given him gold, land, position, protection, but Diogenes needed nothing that Alexander could provide. In fact, the king's very presence was an inconvenience, blocking the free warmth of the sun. The sunlight, natural, available to all, costing nothing, was more valuable than anything in Alexander's empire. Let this sink in gently, like warm light on skin. Who in this encounter was truly free? The king with his armies and his conquests constantly moving, fighting, acquiring, or the philosopher with nothing, content in the sun, needing only that the powerful step aside and let nature's gifts reach him? The story tells us that as Alexander walked away, he remarked to his companions, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." There is a deep poignancy in this admission. Alexander, standing at the pinnacle of worldly success, recognized something in Diogenes that he himself could never have: true freedom, true self-sufficiency, complete liberation from the endless hunger for more. Yet he could not choose that path. His nature, his destiny, his very identity was bound up in conquest and glory. Diogenes, with nothing, possessed something Alexander, with everything, could only admire from a distance. Rest now in this paradox, this gentle reversal of fortune and poverty, power and freedom. Let your breathing become slow and regular, like waves on a distant shore. Diogenes challenged every assumption. When people took pride in their elaborate meals, he ate simple lentils. When they valued privacy and propriety, he performed natural functions in public, arguing that if something was not shameful to do, it was not shameful to do openly. This was shocking, deliberately so, but it was also philosophical. He was asking, why are we ashamed of our nature? Why do we hide our humanity? What are these conventions serving? His life was a constant performance, a piece of living theater that forced witnesses to confront their own choices and values. To see Diogenes was to question everything you thought you knew about how to live. As we breathe slowly together, let us explore what Diogenes was seeking through his shocking behavior and extreme lifestyle. It would be easy to dismiss him as merely provocative, an ancient shock artist with nothing substantive to offer. But beneath the scandalous surface was a coherent philosophy, a genuine search for authenticity and freedom. Diogenes believed that most human misery came from false judgments about what is good and bad. We think we need wealth, so we become enslaved to its pursuit. We think we need reputation, so we become slaves to others' opinions. We think we need comfort, luxury, security, and in seeking these things, we surrender our freedom, our time, our very selves. We become, in his view, trapped in a prison of our own making, locked in by invisible bars forged from social expectations and artificial needs. By stripping away everything, by living with almost nothing, Diogenes proved that these needs were illusions. He was hungry sometimes, yes. He was cold, he was uncomfortable, but he was free. And in his freedom, he found something that wealth and comfort could never provide. He found that he was enough, that life itself was enough, that the sun and the stars and the air and the simple fact of existence were profound gifts that required no enhancement. Breathe into that spaciousness now, that sense of having enough, being enough. The ancient biographer Diogenes Laertius, writing centuries later, collected many stories and sayings of his namesake. We learn that Diogenes the philosopher once remarked, "I have nothing to gain from the gods, for everything that is good is already mine." What an extraordinary statement. Not that he needed nothing from the gods, but that he already possessed everything good. Without property, without home, without family or position, he felt complete. He had trained himself to want nothing beyond what nature freely provided. This is what the Cynics called autarkia, self-sufficiency, the state of needing nothing beyond oneself. It was for them the very essence of freedom. Let your mind rest gently on this concept as your body settles more deeply. Autarkia, self-sufficiency, not isolation or loneliness, but completeness, the freedom that comes from carrying everything essential within yourself. Diogenes also practiced what he called ascesis, which means training or exercise. But this was not physical training for athletic competition. It was training in endurance, in simplicity, in controlling his reactions and desires. He would walk barefoot in snow, embrace statues in winter to grow accustomed to cold, and beg from statues to practice receiving refusal. Every hardship was a teacher, every discomfort an opportunity to demonstrate that he did not require comfort. He was, in a sense, in constant training to be free, strengthening his indifference to external circumstances, cultivating a core of self that could not be touched by fortune or misfortune. There is something almost athletic about this approach to philosophy, something vital and embodied. Philosophy was not abstract theory for Diogenes. It was a daily practice, visible in every action, tested in every moment. As you rest here, breathing slowly, consider how different this is from our usual relationship with comfort. We typically avoid discomfort, seeing it as a problem to solve, an obstacle to happiness. But what if, like Diogenes, we saw it as training, as an opportunity to prove to ourselves that our well-being does not depend on pleasant circumstances? The night grows deeper now, the stars more visible in our ancient sky. And so, we come to the close of our time with Diogenes, allowing our breathing to become even slower, even more gentle, as the stories settle around us like falling leaves. The ancient sources tell us he died in Corinth, possibly on the same day as Alexander the Great, though this might be poetic coincidence rather than historical fact. There are various accounts of his death. Some say he died from eating raw octopus, others that he held his breath, others still that he simply died of old age. What matters more than the manner of his death is what he represented in life, a living question mark, a challenge to everything comfortable and conventional, a human being who chose freedom over security, authenticity over acceptance. His legacy lived on not in writings. He apparently wrote nothing himself, or if he did, none of it survived, but in stories, in memory, in the inspiration he provided to others who sought a different path. The image of the man in the jar, content with sunlight, needing nothing, has haunted the imagination for millennia. It whispers to something deep within us, something that wonders if perhaps we have made life more complicated than it needs to be. If perhaps true wealth is measured not in what we have, but in what we don't need. If perhaps freedom comes not from gaining control over our circumstances, but from loosening circumstances' control over us. Let these thoughts drift through your mind like clouds across a moonlit sky, neither grasping them nor pushing them away. Diogenes would likely have laughed at being treated so reverently, at being made the subject of gentle bedtime stories. He was irreverent, sharp-tongued, deliberately offensive. But beneath the shocking surface was a profound kindness, a belief that people could be free, that they were enslaving themselves unnecessarily, that liberation was available to anyone willing to look clearly at what they actually needed versus what they had been taught to want. In this sense, his harshness was a form of compassion, his mockery a kind of teaching. He held up a mirror to society, and the reflection was uncomfortable because it was true. As you rest now, breathing softly, you need not live in a jar or give away all your possessions or challenge every social convention you encounter. Diogenes took philosophy to an extreme that few could or should follow in its entirety. But perhaps his example can illuminate something valuable, a question to carry lightly into sleep. What if you already have enough? What if you already are enough? What if freedom is closer than you think, hidden not in some distant achievement or acquisition, but in releasing your grip on what you don't actually need? Let these questions dissolve now into the gentle darkness. Our second act comes to rest. We have met the man in the marketplace, the philosopher with the lamp, the cynic who needed only sunlight. His stories will remain, waiting patiently, while we drift now toward even deeper teachings, even gentler wisdom. For now, simply rest, simply breathe, simply be. As Diogenes was, complete in this moment, under these ancient stars, needing nothing more than this, the quiet, the breath, the gentle letting go. And so we breathe, and so we rest, continuing our gentle journey through the wisdom of the ancient Cynics, those remarkable philosophers who sought freedom in the simplest of places. We have walked beside Diogenes through the dusty streets of Athens, witnessed his jar-dwelling existence, felt the warmth of the Mediterranean sun on those ancient stones. Now, as the night deepens and our breathing slows, we turn our attention to the teachings themselves, to the principles that guided these seekers of truth, these champions of a different kind of life. At the very heart of Cynic philosophy lies a concept both simple and profound, living in accordance with nature. The Greek phrase was kata physin, meaning according to nature, and for the Cynics, this was not merely a poetic suggestion, but the foundation of all wisdom, all virtue, all genuine freedom. But what did they mean by nature? Not the romanticized wilderness of later poets, but something more immediate, more honest, more real. To live according to nature, the Cynics taught, meant stripping away everything artificial, everything imposed by human convention, everything that society layered upon our essential being. Imagine, if you will, peeling back the countless expectations, the countless roles we play, the countless possessions we accumulate, until we arrive at something fundamental, something true. This was their quest, pursued with remarkable dedication, sometimes shocking in its thoroughness, always challenging to those who witnessed it. Diogenes, that master of living examples, demonstrated this principle in ways both practical and provocative. He would eat in the marketplace, that public square where respectable citizens conducted business and politics, because he observed that hunger was natural and eating was natural. So why should it be hidden behind doors as though it were shameful? He challenged the very notion that certain natural functions required privacy or apology. When people criticized him, he would respond with that characteristic sharpness. If eating were wrong, he would say, it would be wrong at a banquet too. But beneath the provocations lay a serious philosophical point, one worth contemplating as we drift here in the quiet darkness. The Cynics believed that human beings had created elaborate social structures that often worked against our natural well-being, that trapped us in cycles of desire and dissatisfaction, that taught us to value the wrong things, to pursue happiness in places it could never be found. By returning to nature, to what was genuinely necessary and truly valuable, they believed we could rediscover freedom, authenticity, and peace. Consider how they looked at the animals, those creatures who lived without anxiety about reputation, without desire for luxury, without fear of losing social status. Dogs especially captured their imagination. Indeed, the very word cynic comes from the Greek kynikos, meaning dog-like. This was initially an insult hurled at Diogenes and his followers, but they embraced it with characteristic defiance. Yes, they said, we are like dogs, shameless, simple, living in the present moment, loyal to what truly matters, content with basic necessities. A dog does not worry about what others think of its appearance. A dog does not accumulate possessions. A dog does not pretend to be something it is not. A dog lives according to its nature, directly, honestly, completely. And in that simplicity, the Cynics saw not degradation but liberation, not a lowering of human dignity, but a recovery of something precious that civilization had buried beneath layers of artifice and anxiety. As we rest here, breathing slowly, we can sense the appeal of this vision, even across the centuries. To live simply, naturally, without pretense, without the exhausting effort of maintaining appearances, without the constant striving for more. The Cynics invited people to ask themselves, what do you really need? What truly makes you happy? What would remain if everything else were stripped away? And in asking these questions, they offered a path, narrow perhaps, challenging certainly, but leading towards something they valued above all else: eleutheria, freedom, genuine and complete. Breathing gently, we continue our contemplation of these ancient teachings, letting them wash over us like waves upon a peaceful shore. From living according to nature flows another central principle of Cynic philosophy: autarkeia, that beautiful Greek word meaning self-sufficiency, the state of needing nothing beyond oneself, the condition of being complete, whole, independent of external circumstances. For the Cynics, autarkeia was not merely about minimizing one's physical needs, though that was certainly part of their practice. It was about achieving a deeper kind of independence, a freedom from the tyranny of desire itself, from the endless wanting that keeps so many of us forever chasing, forever unsatisfied, forever dependent on things outside our control. To be self-sufficient was to be truly free, they taught, and this freedom was worth any sacrifice, any hardship, any social censure. Antisthenes, that student of Socrates who planted the first seeds of Cynic thought, used to say that he would rather be mad than feel pleasure. This shocking statement, deliberately provocative, pointed toward a profound insight that the pursuit of pleasure makes us dependent, vulnerable, controlled by our appetites and by whatever might satisfy them. The self-sufficient person, by contrast, needed nothing, wanted nothing, and therefore could not be controlled, could not be threatened, could not be broken. Diogenes embodied this principle with his characteristic thoroughness. He trained himself to endure cold by embracing statues covered in snow during winter. He would walk barefoot through snow, testing himself, strengthening himself, proving that the body could adapt, that humans were far more resilient than soft civilization suggested. He ate simple food, the cheapest available, training his palate to be satisfied with little. He owned almost nothing. Famously, he threw away his drinking cup when he saw a child drinking from cupped hands, realizing that even this simple possession was unnecessary. But we need not follow Diogenes to such extremes to appreciate the wisdom he was pursuing. Consider in this quiet moment how much of our energy goes toward acquiring things, maintaining things, protecting things, wanting things we do not have. Consider how much anxiety arises from dependence, on possessions, on other people's approval, on circumstances remaining favorable, on the complicated machinery of modern life continuing to function smoothly. The Cynics asked, what if we could be happy regardless? What if we needed so little that loss held no terror, that change brought no anxiety, that we carried our happiness within us, self-contained, self-sufficient, free? This was not about isolation or rejection of community, though it might sometimes appear that way. Rather, it was about coming to relationships and to life from a place of wholeness rather than neediness, from strength rather than desperation. The self-sufficient person could love without clinging, could enjoy without grasping, could participate in life without being enslaved by it. This was the freedom they sought, and they pursued it with remarkable dedication. Crates of Thebes, whom we shall meet more fully in our next gentle chapter of this story, gave away an enormous fortune to achieve autarkeia. He understood that wealth, rather than providing security, actually created dependency on the economic system, on servants and managers, on the complicated apparatus required to maintain and protect it. By giving it all away, he became rich in a different sense. Rich in freedom, in simplicity, in the lightness of traveling through life unburdened. The Cynics would often speak of training, askesis in Greek, the same word athletes used for their physical conditioning. Philosophical life, they insisted, was not about abstract theory, but about daily practice, about training oneself in virtue the way an athlete trains the body. Self-sufficiency was a skill to be developed, a muscle to be strengthened, a capacity to be cultivated through repeated exercise. Each time you chose the simple over the elaborate, the necessary over the luxurious, the real over the impressive, you became a little more free, a little more self-sufficient, a little more complete in yourself. As we rest here in the darkness, breathing slowly, we can sense the peacefulness they sought, the deep calm that comes from needing less, from being disturbed by less, from carrying less through the world. We need not embrace their extreme practices to appreciate their insight, to feel the wisdom in cultivating some measure of self-sufficiency, some degree of independence from the endless wanting that so often exhausts us. Simply to recognize our strength, our resilience, our completeness. This itself is a gift, ancient and timeless, offered across the centuries by these remarkable philosophers. And so we drift deeper still, our breathing slow and steady, as we explore another cornerstone of Cynic teaching, the rejection of artificial social conventions, those countless unwritten rules that govern behavior, that determine status, that tell us how to live according to other people's expectations rather than our own nature or genuine virtue. The Cynics looked at their society and saw elaborate systems of convention that had little to do with goodness, truth, or happiness, and they dared to ask, why do we follow these? What if we simply didn't? This was perhaps their most challenging teaching, the one that earned them the most criticism, the most scandal, the most accusations of shamelessness. But shamelessness, anaideia in Greek, was exactly what they cultivated. Not because they celebrated vice, but because they believed that conventional shame often attached itself to the wrong things, that society taught people to feel ashamed of what was natural, while feeling proud of what was artificial and vain. To be shameless, in the Cynic sense, was to be free from false shame, from the anxiety of constantly monitoring one's behavior against arbitrary social standards. Diogenes demonstrated this rejection of convention in countless ways, some gentle, some deliberately shocking. He would mock people who prayed to the gods for health while feasting on foods that caused illness. He would criticize those who spent fortunes on elaborate homes while neglecting to create any beauty in their character. He questioned why Greek culture considered some people slaves by birth while others were free when nature made no such distinction. He challenged gender roles, questioned marriage customs, examined every social institution with that penetrating gaze that asked, is this natural? Is this virtuous? Or is this merely convention, arbitrary and perhaps even harmful? But let us understand what the Cynics were truly arguing as we rest here in peace. They were not advocating chaos or the abandonment of all standards. Rather, they insisted that the only standards that mattered were natural ones and moral ones, not conventional ones. What promotes virtue? What serves genuine human flourishing? What is honest, authentic, real? These were their criteria, and anything that failed these tests, no matter how socially respected, deserved to be questioned, challenged, perhaps rejected entirely. Consider how much of daily life consists of following scripts we never consciously chose. We dress certain ways not because these clothes serve any natural purpose, but because fashion or workplace culture demands it. We speak in certain ways, using polite formulas that often obscure rather than reveal our actual thoughts. We pursue certain markers of success, particular jobs, particular possessions, particular achievements, not because they genuinely make us happy, but because society has labeled them as valuable. The Cynics invited people to wake up from this trance of convention, to examine each assumption, to choose consciously rather than drift along in the current of social expectation. This was dangerous teaching in its way, and remains so. A society built on conventions feels threatened when those conventions are questioned too deeply. Yet the Cynics persisted. believing that the path to authentic virtue required breaking free from the invisible chains of social conditioning. They wanted people to be good, not because it was respectable, but because it was genuinely good. To be kind not for reputation, but from authentic compassion. To live truthfully rather than merely appropriately. Antisthenes taught that the wise person would be guided by their own law, not the law of the mob. This did not mean rejecting all law or morality. The Cynics had a very strong moral code centered on virtue. Rather, it meant that genuine morality had to be internalized, understood, chosen, not merely absorbed thoughtlessly from one's culture. The virtuous person acted rightly because they understood what was right, not because they feared punishment or sought approval. As we breathe here slowly, softly, we can recognize both the challenge and the appeal of this teaching. How much freer we might feel if we could release ourselves from the constant anxiety of meeting social expectations, from the exhausting work of maintaining appearances, from the fear of judgment that follows us through so many interactions. Not to become antisocial, not to harm others, but simply to live more authentically, more honestly, more in accordance with what we genuinely value, rather than what we think we should value. The Cynics remind us gently now as sleep approaches that we have more freedom than we often recognize. The conventions that seem so solid, so necessary, so inevitable, many of them are simply habits, agreements, customs that could be examined, questioned, perhaps released. And in that release might come a lightness, a simplicity, a return to something more natural, more real, more truly our own. Drifting now, gently drifting, we come to perhaps the most practical of Cynic teachings. The emphasis on action over theory, on living virtue rather than merely discussing it, on philosophy as a way of life rather than an academic discipline. The Cynics had little patience for elaborate arguments that led nowhere, for clever debates that changed nothing, for wisdom that remained trapped in words and never touched the ground of actual living. Show me, they would say. Don't tell me about virtue, embody it. Don't explain happiness, be happy. Don't theorize about freedom, be free. This was a revolutionary approach to philosophy, though in some ways a return to its oldest meaning. The word philosophy itself means love of wisdom, and for the Cynics, wisdom was not something you possessed in your mind, but something you enacted with your entire being. It was visible in how you lived, what you chose, how you responded to fortune and misfortune, whether your actions aligned with your professed values. Philosophy was not a subject to study, but a life to live, not a costume to wear, but a transformation to undergo. Diogenes never wrote philosophical treatises, as far as we know. His medium was his life itself, lived publicly, dramatically, provocatively, as a demonstration of his principles. When he lived in his jar, ate simple food, owned nothing, spoke bluntly to everyone regardless of their status, these were not merely personal choices, but philosophical arguments expressed through action. His life said more eloquently than any book, "Look, this is possible, this is real, this is what freedom looks like when you actually pursue it, rather than just talk about it." The Cynics spoke often of parrhesia, that wonderful Greek word meaning frank speech, truth-telling, the courage to speak openly and honestly regardless of consequences. But parrhesia was not just about words. It was about the alignment of word and deed, the integrity that comes from living what you believe. Anyone can speak truth when it's convenient, they taught, but the true philosopher speaks truth to power. Life's truth in poverty, as well as prosperity, remains consistent regardless of circumstances. This emphasis on practical virtue had a leveling effect, a democratic quality that distinguished Cynic philosophy from more elite schools of thought. You did not need years of education to be a Cynic philosopher. You did not need wealth or status or access to rare books. You needed courage, commitment, and the willingness to actually change your life. Virtue was available to everyone, they insisted, because virtue was about action, and anyone could act virtuously regardless of their circumstances. Antisthenes used to say that virtue was sufficient for happiness and needed nothing except the strength of Socrates. By this he meant that virtue was not something added to a happy life, but was itself the substance of happiness, and that cultivating virtue required not complicated theories, but practical strength. The strength to resist temptation, to endure hardship, to remain consistent, to act on principle even when it was difficult. This strength could be developed by anyone willing to practice, to train, to try. As we rest here, breathing gently, we can appreciate this practical wisdom. How often we think about changes we might make, improvements we could pursue, values we want to embody, and yet the thinking remains just thinking, never quite becoming action. The Cynics remind us that the gap between knowing and doing is where wisdom is actually won or lost. It's not enough to understand that simple living might bring peace. The question is whether we simplify. It's not enough to recognize that authenticity matters. The question is whether we live authentically. This is not meant as criticism, but as gentle encouragement, as kind reminder. Philosophy, in the Cynic sense, is always available, always beginning now, always expressed through this choice, this action, this moment. We need not achieve perfection, need not transform everything at once, but we can ask ourselves softly, in this quiet space, is there one small way my actions could better reflect my values? Is there one place where I could live a little more honestly, a little more simply, a little more in accordance with what I truly believe? The Cynics would say that this gentle questioning, this willingness to align life with wisdom, this is where philosophy lives, where it breathes, where it matters. Not in the books, though books have their place. Not in the theories, though understanding has its value. But in the lived moment, the chosen action, the embodied virtue. Here in the doing, here in the being. Here as we rest, as we breathe, as we perhaps allow their ancient courage to inspire our own small acts of authenticity, of simplicity, of truth. Here now, gently the philosophy continues, not in ancient Athens, but in this present moment, wherever we are, however we are, simply by living with a little more awareness, a little more intention, a little more alignment between what we value and how we live. And now, as our time with these teachings draws toward gentle conclusion, as our breathing slows and deepens, and the night embraces us more fully, we reflect on what all these principles meant together, what vision of the good life the Cynics offered to their world and continue to offer to ours, across the vast distance of centuries, across all that has changed and all that remains somehow the same in human longing, human searching, human hope. The Cynics proposed something radical and yet profoundly simple, that happiness comes not from having more, but from needing less, not from climbing higher in social hierarchies, but from stepping outside them entirely, not from accumulating possessions and achievements and approval, but from discovering the freedom, the completeness, the sufficiency that was always already present within. They looked at their society, wealthy, sophisticated, cultured Athens at its height, and said, "You are looking for happiness in all the wrong places. You are making yourselves miserable in your pursuit of what you think will make you happy." Living according to nature, practicing self-sufficiency, rejecting artificial conventions, embodying virtue through action, these principles wove together into a coherent philosophy of life, a path toward what they called eudaimonia, that rich Greek word often translated as happiness or flourishing, but meaning something deeper, more complete, the state of living well, of human thriving, of being truly in accord with the best possibilities of human existence. For the Cynics, eudaimonia was not a feeling but a condition, not a pleasure but a state of being, not something that came and went with circumstances, but something that could remain stable, solid, unshakable regardless of fortune. The virtuous person who lived according to nature, who needed little, who remained authentic, such a person was happy in the deepest sense, and nothing could take that happiness away because it did not depend on anything external, anything that could be lost. This was a happiness available to anyone, they insisted, not reserved for the wealthy or the educated or the powerful, not requiring good luck or favorable circumstances, available to the slave as much as the free person, to the poor as much as the rich, to anyone with the courage to question, to simplify, to live honestly and authentically. This was perhaps the most democratic element of their philosophy, and also the most challenging, because it meant that unhappiness could not be blamed entirely on circumstances. It meant we had more power, and therefore more responsibility, for our own flourishing than we might wish. As we drift here now, so peacefully, so quietly, we need not embrace all of their radical practices to receive their gifts. We need not live in jars or give away everything or challenge every social convention, but we can receive their questions, let them settle gently into our awareness like leaves falling onto still water. What do I really need? Where am I being controlled by desires that don't serve me? Which conventions am I following thoughtlessly? Where is there a gap between my values and my actions? What would freedom feel like? Real freedom, internal freedom. These questions are not meant to create anxiety or self-criticism, especially not here, not now, as sleep approaches. They are meant as gentle openings, as spaces for possibility, as reminders that we have more freedom than we often remember, that simplicity is available, that authenticity is possible, that the good life might be found not by adding and achieving and acquiring, but by releasing and simplifying, and returning to something more essential, more natural, more true. The Cynics challenged their society profoundly, but they did so in service of something deeply human, deeply kind. The vision of human beings living free from unnecessary suffering, from artificial anxieties, from the exhausting burden of pretense and performance. They wanted people to be happy, truly happy, and they believed with all their being that the path to that happiness led through simplicity, through authenticity, through virtue, through the courage to live according to one's own understanding rather than others' expectations. And so these principles remain, ancient and yet alive, waiting patiently to be discovered by each generation anew. Living according to nature, practicing self-sufficiency, questioning conventions, embodying wisdom through action. These teachings rest now in the space around us, in the quiet darkness, in the gentle rhythm of breath, not demanding anything, not insisting on anything, simply present, simply offering, simply inviting us to consider what freedom might mean, what happiness might be, what it might feel like to need less, to be more authentic, to live more simply, more truly, more completely ourselves. The Cynics offer this invitation still, softly, kindly, across all the years between their time and ours. And we can rest now, holding it gently, letting it settle, letting these ancient teachings become part of the peaceful darkness, part of the quiet, part of the slow descent into sleep, where all questions soften, all teachings dissolve into simple rest, simple peace, simple being. And so we continue our journey through the gentle darkness, drifting now from those timeless principles toward the living souls who carried them forward, who breathed life into these ideas through their own remarkable choices, their own brave rejections, their own pursuit of something truer than the world around them offered. We turn now to Crates of Thebes, a man born into wealth and privilege, surrounded by all the comforts that ancient Greek society could provide, yet who looked at his inheritance and saw not treasure but chains, not security but limitation, not freedom but a golden cage that would keep him forever from discovering what he truly was beneath all that glittering accumulation. Imagine him there in Thebes, that ancient city, with its great walls and proud history, standing perhaps in the courtyard of his family estate, looking at the wealth that would be his, the property and possessions and social standing, all of it waiting for him like a predetermined life, a script already written. And something in Crates resisted. Something in him questioned. He had encountered the teachings of the Cynics, perhaps heard of Diogenes and his radical freedom, and these ideas took root in fertile soil, growing into a conviction that changed everything. The accounts tell us that Crates gave it all away, his entire fortune, all the material wealth that defined his place in society, simply released it like a man opening his hands to let something heavy fall, something he no longer wished to carry. Can you imagine that moment, that decision, the courage it would take to step away from everything you'd been told mattered, everything your family and society said would bring happiness and security? He didn't just reduce his possessions or live modestly. He divested himself completely, choosing voluntary poverty, choosing the freedom that comes from needing nothing the world could give or take away. And in making that choice, Crates became one of the most beloved philosophers of the ancient world, known not for harsh criticism like Diogenes, but for his gentle wisdom, his kindness, his genuine warmth toward his fellow human beings. They called him the door opener, because he would walk into any home in Athens, welcomed everywhere, offering philosophical counsel delivered with such gentleness that even those who disagreed felt comforted by his presence. He had found something in letting go, something that made him more rather than less, more connected rather than isolated, more free rather than impoverished. His life became a living demonstration that happiness doesn't require wealth, that freedom doesn't come from accumulation, that the richest life might actually be the simplest one, unburdened by the constant need to maintain, protect, and increase what we own. And we can rest with this image now, letting it settle. The picture of a man walking away from golden chains towards something truer, something that couldn't be bought or sold or taken away, something that lived in the way he moved through the world, open-handed and open-hearted, free. But Krates' story becomes even more remarkable, even more touching, when we come to understand that he didn't walk this philosophical path alone. For it was Krates who encountered a young woman named Hipparchia, born into a wealthy family in Maronea, a woman who attended one of his philosophical discourses and found herself utterly transformed by what she heard, by the vision of life he presented, by the possibility of freedom he embodied. And Hipparchia didn't simply admire this philosophy from a safe distance, didn't treat it as an interesting intellectual exercise to contemplate while maintaining her comfortable life. She fell completely in love, both with the philosophy and with the philosopher himself. She declared to her family that she wished to marry Krates and live as he lived, to become a Cynic philosopher herself, to adopt the same radical simplicity, the same rejection of convention, the same pursuit of virtue and freedom. Imagine the shock, the resistance she must have faced. In ancient Greece, women of wealthy families lived carefully circumscribed lives, their roles defined by marriage, household management, and social propriety. Philosophy was a masculine domain, public life was off limits, and the very idea of a woman choosing voluntary poverty, choosing to live in public spaces, choosing to engage in philosophical debate with men, all of this was not just unusual but virtually unthinkable, a violation of every social norm that structured Greek society. Her family tried desperately to dissuade her. They brought forth other suitors, men of wealth and status who could offer her a conventional life of comfort and security. They argued, pleaded, even threatened. But Hipparchia remained unmoved, her conviction absolute. The story tells us that Krates himself tried to discourage her, wanting her to understand fully what she would be choosing, the hardships she would face, the scorn and ridicule that would come from a society unprepared for a female philosopher. He even removed his cloak before her, showing her his simple, worn body and possessions, saying essentially, "This is all I am, this is all I have, this is what you would be choosing." And Hipparchia looked at him, at his honesty, at his freedom, at the life of authenticity he represented, and she chose it anyway, chose him anyway, chose philosophy anyway. She married Krates, donned the simple cloak of the Cynics, and became the first prominent female philosopher in Western history whose story has come down to us. A woman who lived her philosophy in the marketplace, in the streets, in public debate, refusing to be confined by gender expectations, claiming her own right to pursue wisdom and freedom on her own terms. Together they lived and taught, a philosophical partnership that was also a love story, a marriage of equals, united not by property or social advancement, but by shared values, shared purpose, shared commitment to living authentically. And we can breathe with this now, gently, letting their courage settle into us, the courage to be who we truly are, the courage to reject what doesn't serve our deepest truth, the courage to love freely, to choose freely, to live freely. The ancient sources tell us that Hipparchia and Krates had at least one child, a son, and this itself becomes part of their philosophical testimony, proof that the Cynic life didn't require absolute solitude or rejection of family bonds, but rather a different way of forming and maintaining those bonds, free from the conventional structures of property and propriety that usually defined family life in ancient Greece. Hipparchia participated fully in philosophical discourse, engaging in public debates, writing philosophical works, though sadly none have survived, and living as an equal partner in the philosophical project she and Krates shared. The stories about her reveal both the hostility she faced and her skillful responses to it. One account describes a symposium where a philosopher named Theodoros the Atheist tried to humiliate her, to use her gender against her, questioning what right she had to abandon the proper role of women, the weaving and household tasks expected of her station. And Hipparchia responded with a philosophical argument, using logic to dismantle his criticism, concluding that if actions are not wrong when performed by men, they cannot be wrong simply because they're performed by women, that virtue and wisdom have no gender, that the pursuit of philosophy and the good life is a human pursuit, not a masculine one. She defended her choices not by appealing to special circumstances or exceptions, but by challenging the very foundations of the gender conventions that sought to limit her. She lived her philosophy, and her philosophy was freedom, the freedom to be fully human regardless of societal categories and expectations. And as we consider Hipparchia's life, we might feel something stirring, something about the courage it takes to step outside the roles we've been assigned, to question the limitations placed upon us by accident of birth or circumstance, to claim our own right to seek wisdom, to pursue what matters most to us, to define our own lives rather than accepting definitions imposed from without. Hipparchia lived more than 2,000 years ago, in a society vastly different from our own, yet something in her story remains luminous and relevant, something that speaks across the centuries about human potential and human freedom. She proved through her life that philosophy wasn't for the wealthy alone, wasn't for men alone, wasn't for those already granted privilege and leisure, that anyone willing to let go of conventional securities, willing to think for themselves, willing to live by their own authentic values, could claim the freedom and wisdom the Cynics taught. And this is restful somehow, isn't it? This knowing that freedom has always been possible for those brave enough to choose it, that the barriers are real but not absolute, that we can always decide what kind of life we wish to live, what matters most to us, what we're willing to release in order to grasp what's truest. We can let that settle now, gently, breathing it in like cool night air, letting their example become a quiet encouragement deep within, not demanding anything, just reminding us that we too have choices. We too can step toward authenticity. We too can let go of what binds us. As we drift further now, deeper into the gentle darkness, we can trace the ripples that spread outward from these Cynic lives, the influence they carried forward through time, the seeds they planted in the philosophical traditions that followed. The Cynics themselves remained a relatively small movement, never establishing formal schools or systematic doctrines, always emphasizing practice over theory, action over academic philosophy. But their ideas proved remarkably fertile, particularly as they encountered other philosophical traditions seeking to understand how human beings could live well, could find happiness and freedom amid the challenges and uncertainties of existence. And nowhere was this influence more profound than in the development of Stoicism, that great philosophical school that would eventually spread throughout the ancient world, finding followers from slaves to emperors, from Greece to Rome to every corner of the Mediterranean. The founder of Stoicism, Zeno of Citium, was himself a student of Crates. There's our gentle Crates again. Door opener, teacher, planting seeds that would grow into magnificent gardens. Zeno learned from Crates the Cynic emphasis on virtue as the only true good, the importance of living in accordance with nature, the need to distinguish between what's truly in our control and what isn't, the value of self-sufficiency and inner freedom. But Zeno and the Stoics who followed him refined these ideas, systematized them, made them somewhat less extreme and more accessible to people living ordinary lives with families and responsibilities and social obligations. Where the Cynics rejected civilization almost entirely, living on the margins as provocative examples, the Stoics sought to live wisely within society, to fulfill their roles and duties while maintaining inner freedom, to engage with the world while remaining unattached to outcomes, to practice virtue in the midst of life rather than apart from it. The Stoics developed elaborate theories of physics, logic, and ethics, building a comprehensive philosophical system that addressed every aspect of human existence. Yet at the core, the Cynic influence remained, that emphasis on virtue as sufficient for happiness, that recognition that we suffer primarily because of our judgments and attachments, rather than external circumstances. That conviction that true freedom comes from within, from how we relate to our experiences, rather than from the experiences themselves. Through the Stoics, Cynic insights reached people who might never have embraced the extreme asceticism of a Diogenes or even the gentle simplicity of a Crates, but who could still benefit from understanding that needing less brings a kind of peace, that virtue matters more than reputation, that we're more free than we usually realize. And this philosophical inheritance continued flowing forward, influencing early Christian monasticism, with its emphasis on voluntary poverty and simple living, inspiring various countercultural movements throughout history whenever people felt the weight of materialism and convention becoming too heavy, offering an enduring, alternative vision of what human life could be. And we can rest here, in this long view, seeing how ideas move through time like rivers finding their channels, how one person's radical choice can influence generations, how the search for freedom and authenticity is not our burden alone, but something humans have always pursued, always will pursue, an eternal conversation we're joining, not beginning. And so we arrive at something restful now, something peaceful, as we consider what these ancient cynics might offer us here in the quiet darkness, here in this space between waking and sleeping, where the mind grows soft and receptive, where ideas don't need to be grasped tightly but can simply float past like clouds across a twilight sky, present and then gone, leaving perhaps a subtle influence, a gentle coloring of consciousness. The Cynics invite us to question, always to question, but gently now, without urgency, to question what we think we need, what we've been told matters, what we're pursuing so relentlessly, what we're afraid to lose. They suggest, without insisting, that we might already have everything required for peace, for freedom, for a good life, if only we could see clearly, could release what's extra, what's burden rather than blessing. There's something deeply restful in their teaching that virtue, which we might translate simply as being good, being authentic, being true to our best self, that this alone is sufficient, that everything else is neither here nor there, neither good nor bad in itself, just neutral, just stuff, just circumstances that we experience but need not define us. When we truly understand this, truly feel it rather than just thinking it, something relaxes, doesn't it? Some constant low-grade anxiety about getting and keeping and maintaining and protecting, it softens, releases, lets go. The Cynics lived this understanding so radically that their lives became teachings more powerful than words, demonstrations of human freedom that continue speaking across 25 centuries, whispering to us in the darkness that we're more free than we know, that we're carrying burdens we could set down, that the cage we feel trapped in might have an open door we haven't noticed, haven't tried, haven't believed could really be there. And we're not being asked to give away our fortunes or live in jars or provoke society. We're only being invited to recognize that those were extreme examples pointing toward a truth we can embrace more moderately, more gently, more suited to our own lives and circumstances. We're being reminded that freedom lives inside, that peace comes from letting go rather than grasping, that we have choices we might have forgotten we have. And this is gentle now, very gentle, just a whisper, just a possibility, just an invitation to rest in the understanding that we're enough. We have enough, this moment is enough, and everything else, all the striving and acquiring and proving and defending, can be set aside for now, released into the darkness, given over to sleep. The Cynics found freedom by needing nothing from the world. We find freedom now by needing nothing from this moment except permission to rest, to soften, to let go, to drift, to sleep. And so we do, carrying with us the quiet courage of Crates and Hipparchia, the wild freedom of Diogenes, the questioning spirit of Antisthenes, all of it settling now, becoming peaceful, becoming quiet, becoming part of the darkness that holds us. The darkness where all philosophy resolves into simple being, simple breathing, simple rest. And now as we settle deeper into this darkness, this quiet space where philosophy becomes feeling, where ancient wisdom dissolves into the simple rhythm of breath, we find ourselves considering what remains, what lingers from these ancient teachers, these philosophers who walked dusty roads with nothing, who owned nothing, who needed nothing. The Cynics are so distant now, separated from us by thousands of years, by empires risen and fallen, by languages transformed, by entire civilizations that bloomed and faded like flowers in a garden we can barely remember. And yet something of them persists. Something of their wisdom drifts down through time like leaves falling slowly, slowly through still air, settling gently on the ground of our awareness. It is curious, isn't it, how ideas can travel across such distances, across such spans of time. How the choice of Diogenes to live simply, to need less, to want less, still whispers to us now. How Crates giving away his fortune still speaks of something we recognize, something we feel in the quieter moments, when the noise of life subsides and we wonder what truly matters. The Cynics taught freedom through letting go, freedom through simplicity, freedom through releasing our grip on the things we think we need, the things we think define us, the things we believe we cannot live without. And perhaps that message finds us here, in this peaceful darkness, where we are already practicing a kind of letting go of the day, letting go of worries, letting go of thoughts that chase themselves in circles. Here, in the borderland of sleep, we are already living a little like the Cynics lived, needing nothing but this moment, this breath, this gentle descent into rest. The wisdom they offered was not complicated, not intricate, not filled with elaborate systems of thought. It was simple. Be free, need less. Live according to what is natural, what is essential, what is true. And in the simplicity of that message, there is something that soothes us, something that eases the complexity we carry, the endless wanting and striving and accumulating that fills our days. What if freedom is simpler than we imagine? What if it has always been simpler, closer, more available than all our searching suggests? The Cynics thought so. They believed that freedom was not something to achieve through great effort, but something to reveal by removing what obscures it. Like a sculptor removing marble to reveal the form within, we might find freedom by removing the excess, the unnecessary, the weights we carry that we never needed to pick up in the first place. And so we rest with this thought, this gentle possibility. Freedom through simplicity, peace through letting go, the wisdom of needing less, wanting less, being content with less. These ideas wash over us like waves, gentle waves on a peaceful shore, each one arriving and receding, soothing, rhythmic, endless, and calm. We don't need to grasp these ideas, don't need to hold them tightly or understand them completely. We simply let them be here with us, in this darkness, in this quietness, as we drift deeper, deeper into rest, into peace, into the simple freedom of this moment, this breath, this gentle fading of thought into the softness of sleep. There is a certain peace in imagining a life reduced to essentials. The Cynics knew this peace, lived this peace, embodied this peace in every choice they made. When Diogenes looked around at the marketplace, at people rushing and worrying and accumulating and competing, he saw something they could not see. He saw how much of their suffering was self-created, how much of their anxiety came from wanting things they didn't have, from fearing the loss of things they did have, from comparing themselves to others, from trying to maintain appearances, from building elaborate lives on foundations of sand. And so he stepped out of that cycle entirely. He chose differently. He chose to need almost nothing, to want almost nothing, and in that radical simplicity he found something rare and precious: freedom, actual freedom. Not the freedom to have more, but the freedom from needing more. Not the freedom to do anything, but the freedom from being controlled by desires, by fears, by the opinions of others. This is a different kind of freedom than we usually imagine. We often think of freedom as expansion, as having more options, more choices, more possibilities spreading out before us like roads on a map. But the Cynics understood freedom as something else, something that moves in the opposite direction. Freedom as contraction, as simplification, as the peace that comes when we stop chasing, stop wanting, stop needing the world to be different than it is. There is wisdom in this, ancient wisdom that still speaks clearly if we quiet ourselves enough to listen. The wisdom that says peace is not found by adding more to our lives, but by discovering what can be released. The wisdom that says happiness is not achieved by getting what we want, but by wanting less. The wisdom that says freedom is not about controlling our circumstances, but about freeing ourselves from the need to control. These ideas arrive gently now, softly, without force or urgency. They simply float here in the darkness with us, these ancient insights, these timeless truths that the Cynics lived and taught and demonstrated through every day of their unconventional lives. We can feel the truth of it, can't we? Even as we rest here. We can feel how much lighter we become when we let go. How much easier it is to breathe when we stop holding so tightly to everything. Stop trying to make the world conform to our preferences. Stop resisting what is. The Cynics would say that nature itself teaches this lesson if we watch carefully. The trees don't worry about tomorrow. The birds don't accumulate more than they need. The stream doesn't struggle against the rocks but flows around them, finding the path of least resistance. Always moving, always free. Never held by anything for long. To live in accordance with nature, as the Cynics advised, means to live with this kind of ease, this kind of flow, this kind of trust in what is, rather than constant striving for what might be. And here, in this moment of deepening rest, we are living in accordance with nature. We are allowing the natural process of sleep to unfold, not forcing it, not fighting it, simply surrendering to it, trusting it, letting it carry us like that stream carries a leaf, gently, surely, toward the peaceful oblivion of deep rest. The Cynics would recognize this surrender, would see in it the same wisdom they practiced every day. The wisdom of letting go, the wisdom of trusting what is natural, the wisdom of needing less, being content with less, finding freedom in less. And so we drift with these thoughts, these gentle ancient teachings, feeling them settle into us like stones settling into soft earth, becoming part of us, becoming part of this moment, this breath, this slow, sweet descent into sleep. What do we truly need? This is the question the Cynics asked, the question they lived, the question that shaped every choice they made. What do we truly need? Not what do we want, not what would be nice to have, not what others have, not what society tells us we should have, but truly, actually, essentially need. The answer they discovered was surprisingly little. Food enough for today, water, shelter from the harshest weather, and perhaps most importantly, virtue, character, the inner resources that allow us to meet life with courage and wisdom and strength. Everything else, they believed, was extra, optional, often more burden than blessing. This perspective is like a cool cloth on a fevered mind, isn't it? In a world that constantly tells us we need more, should want more, deserve more, the Cynic voice arrives like a whisper in the darkness saying, "You already have enough. You already are enough. You need nothing more than what this moment contains." There is such relief in that message, such peace, such rest. We can feel it even now, can't we, as we lie here in the darkness? We need nothing in this moment. Nothing needs to be different. Nothing needs to be added or achieved or acquired. This moment, exactly as it is enough. We are enough. Everything is already complete, already whole, already perfect in its simple existence. The Cynics would sometimes ask, who is truly free, the king with his palace and armies and treasures, or the philosopher with nothing but a cloak and his own mind? The king must worry about his kingdom, must guard his treasures, must fear losing what he has, must constantly work to maintain his position, his power, his possessions. He is, in a sense, owned by his ownership, possessed by his possessions, imprisoned by his palace. But the philosopher who owns nothing has nothing to lose, nothing to guard, nothing to maintain, nothing to fear being taken away. He is light, mobile, unburdened, free. Free to go where he wishes, think what he wishes, speak what he wishes, be who he truly is without the weight of accumulation pressing down on his shoulders. This is the freedom the Cynics chose, the freedom they embodied, the freedom they offered to anyone willing to receive it. And while we may not choose to live as they lived, may not be called to such extreme simplicity, there is still something we can receive from their example, something that can ease us even here, even now, as we drift towards sleep. We can receive the permission to want less, the permission to need less, the permission to be content with simplicity, with sufficiency, with enough. We can feel how that permission relaxes something in us, loosens some tight grip we've been maintaining, allows us to settle more deeply into this moment, this darkness, this peace. What if we imagine just for now that we need nothing more than this rest, this breath, this gentle darkness that holds us? What if this is already complete, already perfect, already everything we need? The Cynics would say it is, would say it always has been, would say that we carry everything essential within us, and everything else is just decoration, just distraction, just weight we can choose to set down. And so we set it down now, all of it, everything we think we need, everything we're worried about, everything we're striving for. We set it all down, just for now, just for this moment of rest, and we discover what the Cynics discovered. That without all that weight, we float, we ease, we soften. We become light enough to drift, to fade, to dissolve into the peace that was always here, waiting beneath the burden, waiting for us to finally let go and rest. Inner freedom. This is what remains now as we drift deeper into rest, deeper into darkness, deeper into the peace that underlies everything. Inner freedom. The Cynics pointed toward it, lived from it, demonstrated it in every unconventional choice, every sharp observation, every rejection of what society demanded. They understood that true freedom is not found in external circumstances, but in the interior landscape, in the mind, in the heart, in the capacity to remain undisturbed regardless of what happens around us. This is the freedom that no one can take away, the freedom that exists even in a simple ceramic jar in a marketplace, the freedom that persists even when we own nothing, even when we have nothing, even when we are nothing in the eyes of the world. Because this freedom is not built on having or achieving or becoming. It is built on being, on the simple, irreducible fact of existence, on the awareness that watches everything, needs nothing, is touched by nothing, remains always free, always whole, always at peace. We touch this freedom now, in this liminal space between waking and sleeping. We touch it in the letting go, in the release, in the softening of boundaries, in the fading of the constructed self with all its wants and fears and stories. What remains when all that fades? Awareness remains, being remains, presence remains, and it is free, has always been free, was never not free. The Cynics knew this, lived from this recognition, tried to show others this simple truth, that underneath all our elaborate constructions, underneath all our social masks and material accumulations and carefully maintained identities, there is something simple, something essential, something that needs nothing, wants nothing, lacks nothing, something already and always free. We don't need to understand this completely. We don't need to grasp it or master it or make it into another thing to achieve. We simply rest with it, rest in it, rest as it, here in the darkness, here in the softness, here in the gentle dissolving of everything that seemed so solid, so important, so necessary just hours ago. It all becomes soft now, becomes gentle, becomes quiet. The Cynic wisdom becomes a lullaby, a gentle song about letting go, about needing less, about finding freedom within, about resting in what is, about trusting the simple perfection of existence itself. We hear this lullaby in the darkness, we feel it in the softness, we become it as we fade, as we drift, as we dissolve into sleep. Inner freedom, the freedom to rest, the freedom to let go, the freedom to need nothing, want nothing, be nothing but this moment, this breath, this gentle awareness fading into dreams, into darkness, into the deep peace that holds everything, includes everything, is everything. The philosophers become shadows now, distant shadows in ancient streets, and their wisdom becomes our wisdom, their peace becomes our peace, their freedom becomes our freedom as we drift deeper, softer, quieter into rest. Inner freedom, already here, already present, already complete. Nothing to find, nothing to achieve, nothing to become. Simply this, simply here, simply now, simply being, simply breathing, simply resting in the gentle freedom that was always present, waiting for us to finally stop searching and sink into it, dissolving, releasing, letting go completely, resting completely, free completely in this simple darkness, this simple breath, this simple moment of perfect, peaceful rest. And now, so softly, so gently, we come to rest. We come to the place the Cynics knew, the place they lived from, the place of simple being, simple peace, simple freedom. Everything becomes so quiet now, so still, so peaceful. The ancient philosophers fade into history, into legend, into the timeless realm where all wisdom lives. And we fade too, fade into sleep, fade into darkness, fade into rest. The lessons dissolve like mist, like morning fog that lifts as the day warms, leaving only the clear space, the open space, the free space where nothing is needed, nothing is lacking, nothing needs to be different. We rest in this space now, this spacious darkness, this gentle nothing that is somehow everything. Simplicity, the wisdom of simplicity, the peace of simplicity, letting go of complexity, letting go of struggle, letting go of needing things to be other than they are. Just this, just now, just breath, just softness, just fading. The Cynics walk their ancient streets, and we walk into dreams, and somehow it is the same path, the same journey, the same movement toward freedom, toward peace, toward the simple truth beneath all complexity. We are so tired now, so ready to rest, so ready to let everything go, let everything be, let everything dissolve into this perfect darkness, this perfect peace, this perfect moment of surrender. Need nothing, want nothing, be nothing but this gentle fading, this soft dissolving, this sweet release into sleep. The philosophy becomes feeling, becomes sensation, becomes the gentle weight of blankets, the soft support of pillow, the quiet darkness of room, everything simple now, everything peaceful, everything exactly right. Diogenes in his jar, Crates giving everything away, Hipparchia choosing freedom, Antisthenes questioning everything, all of them here in the darkness, all of them peaceful now, all of them free, and we are free too. Free to rest, free to let go, free to fade into the sleep that calls us, so gentle, so soft, so welcoming. Inner freedom, outer simplicity, ancient wisdom, timeless peace, all of it settling, softening, quieting, becoming breath, becoming heartbeat, becoming the slow fade into dreams, into darkness, into deep, deep rest. Nothing needed, nothing wanted, nothing but this gentle moment, this soft breath, this peaceful fading. The Cynics knew, they knew this peace, this simplicity, this freedom, and now we know it too, we feel it, we become it as we drift, as we fade, as we finally let go completely and rest. So soft now, so quiet, so peaceful, just breathing, just being, just drifting into sleep, into dreams, into the freedom of complete rest, complete peace, complete letting go. The ancient wisdom becomes silence, becomes darkness, becomes sleep, and we rest, we dream, simple, peaceful, finally home, finally still, finally at rest in the gentle darkness that holds everything, includes everything, is everything. Sleep now, rest now, peace now. The Cynics whisper from far away, you are already free, you are always free, just rest, just be, just sleep. And we do, we sleep, we rest, we fade into the perfect peace, the simple peace, the freedom of sleep, so soft, so gentle, so complete. Thank you for listening tonight. If this story helped you drift off, consider leaving a like and subscribing for more calming stories. Sweet dreams, and I'll see you next time.